in CSS. Grade is kind of pretty big topic, so we're gonna divide it into two parts. We're gonna have this video called grade 1, and then we'll have another video called grade 2. So the question is, what is a grade? So if we come back to here, we have a website.html, a single file as usual. I have this container, then I have items in another container, and basically just a style, nothing new here. I'm using OpenLive server to run this. So a grid is way of, as you would expect it, displaying your content in a grid. So in another video, we discussed flashbacks and how you can move around content using flashbacks. Flashbacks usually work great with one directions. Then you can move. You can move in multiple places, but sometimes you want to work with 2D. And then the grade comes in hand. Then you can you can basically create a pretty good looking grade. So right here we have all these items and they take up the space in it. So these are kind of all the items. So how do we start? Grade, we can divide grade into two parts. We're gonna divide it into container, just as flashbacks, and then we have item. So we have a container and item. Now there are certain properties that are unique to the containers, and then certain properties that are unique to the items, individual items. So in this video, we're just gonna talk about the properties that are available in the container, and then in the next video, we'll talk about the properties that are available inside the items. So let's start. As usual, we wanna say display, and this time we'll just say grade, and then I'm gonna save this. And now after, it just added a little space, but it's pretty much the same. So after you create, after you add the grade, now this becomes a grade container and this becomes a grade item. Now you can set certain things. So I want to set a column. So I want to have like 3 columns right now. So let me use a grade template. You say columns, and then you need to give a size of your columns. So I'm just gonna define the size. So I'm not gonna specify any hard number. So I'm just gonna use auto. So auto means basically divide into 3 parts and give 1 column to each part. If I save this, now we see we divided into 3 equal columns. So this column took this, and basically now we have 3 columns. That's great. Now you can have this property. That's also called, instead of columns, you can have rows, right? And then it basically works the same. So you can make it auto, and if I make it 3 right now, nothing basically happens because the items that we have already filled. So this is not gonna add anything to now, but if you, instead of the columns, if you want to specify rows, you just use that property. So I'm just gonna keep working with this. Now here we're saying tag, basically divide this space into 3 parts and then give each column to a part. But we can actually specify a specific one. So if I say, for example, 200 pixels, that's hilarious. So it is like, the first one is silly small, you can't even see. So I'm gonna be 200. Let's just make all of them 200. Give this 200 pixels and give 200 pixels. If I save this, now everyone is kind of like, everyone is smaller. So let me just make here. It's gonna make it 1 pixel. See another difference. Now we see we have a lot of space. So if you want one item to take the rest of the space, you don't specify it. So let's say this, we want the second one to kind of expand the second column, we just give it auto, and if I save this, now it takes all the available space. And you can do the same for that. So instead of having here, you can just be like, the last one would take the rest of the space, but also you can specify the first one and then divide the rest for the rest of the space. So this one, so this took the 100 pixels, this column, and then these 2 columns divided the rest. So that's kind of the first part. Now I want to kind of talk about here. As you would expect, we have columns go like this. So we have 1 column here, we have another column here. I think this might help us a little bit, right? You see that column, then we have another column there, and then we have another column there. But so we have 1 column, 2 column, 3 column, and we have rows. So it would be 1 row, 2 row. But also we have lines. So if you say this is the first line of, let's just call it column line 1, column line 2, column line 2, column line 3. And here we have row line 1, row line 2, row line 3. And that will come in handy later when we go to that, when we want to put individual item in a specific place. So I'm actually going to go back to 100 pixels here because I want to show other things that will need this space. So save that. Great. So now here in the gray, so this is kind of the main axis. You can think of this as the main axis. So you can move the items around the main axis, and you have a cross axis. So you can move the items around cross axis. So let's just do in the main axis. So CMX is just by content, which is same as Fluxbox, which is great for us. So you can center. If I save this, now the whole grid is centered in the container. I could say start. If I save this, the container is start, which is the default. I could say end. The container would go to the end as you would expect it. But I can also do the space. So I can do space around. So every item has space around it. Every column, I mean, we could do space between. So basically, we put items as far apart as possible. So stick to the side, go the center of the other two. And then we can have the last, which is space evenly. And if I save this, they're evenly spaced. So this space is equal to this space, which is equal to this space and this. You kind of understand how you can work with that. So, and then we can do the same for the cross axis, which is kind of, let me actually do this. Just call it main axis. So that would be the main axis. And then we have cross axis. And then the property that you would expect it to work for the cross axis. So I'm just going to go start here just to make it easier. Right. Cross axis is as it's the same property you work with Fluxbox. It's align content, which is kind of a great. So now you can center. It's hard to see because we don't have height. So I'm just going to give here height of 200 pixels. What about I'm gonna do like 500 pixels? Whoa, that looks pretty good. I mean, we can work with that. Let me just great. So now I could say start here. So start. Now I'm starting right there. I want to say end, and then I go to the end, and then I could also center items. So I centered right there. I could also do the space around. So now there's space around both rows. So this basically, it's moving around the rows, right? And this is columns because the rows are kind of the other way around. And then we have one more space property called space between. So it sticks to the sides. So if you wanted to center like this grid, you basically center the cross axis. Right now we centered in the cross axis. It's in the center, but we also center in the main axis. I mean, that looks pretty good. That is all I wanted to cover. Basically, there's 4 things. Number 1, in the container of a grid that you need to know. There are more, but that's kind of the main thing. So, number 1, you make the container grid. Number 2, you specify the number of columns or the number of rows you want. Number 3, you justify the you align the content in the main axis. So you want it here or here or here. Do you want a space around or whatever? And then you move around in the x-axis. And these two only work if there is a space to move around. So if I remove the height, for example, then the center doesn't really matter because the box is like, the height of the box is like very small. So the center really doesn't matter. And if I make this auto, so instead of them taking specific ones, if I just make it, right? So auto actually works with this because if I remove this, now they will take up the rest. But now this still works. So the individual items would still work in that way. Yeah, that is all I wanted to talk about in this video. See you in the next video.